Hello and welcome to the AUSD Board of Education Candidates Forum. My name is Nicole Nie and I'm the moderator for today. I'm here in person with Mr. Ben Zhang and Mr. Fenton Ang, and joining us virtually is Ms. Lee Chavez. They are all candidates running for 2 seats in the upcoming election. Prior to the last forum on May 11th, questions were shared with the candidates, but tonight the candidates do not know the questions we will be asking them. We received 55 questions submitted in 21 different emails or cards, so unfortunately we won't be able to ask every question tonight. All right, let's get started. For the first question, Mr. Ang, when did your relationship with AUSD start? What experience specifically within AUSD makes you a valuable asset to the Board of Education?
My experience started fairly immediately. I moved here in 2001 with my 2 children who were elementary school aged children. So I began to get involved in terms of their experience. I volunteered as a PTA dad and volunteered in other areas of the community, such as coaching Little League and so on. From there I continued to be involved in PTA. I chaired a number of committees. I ultimately became the very rare male PTA president at Dana Middle School, and I also became PTA president at Arcadia High School. From there I went on to become board member, and now I'm running for re-election.
All right, thank you. Mr. Zhang, when did your relationship with AUSD start?
Over the past few years, I've been involved with the City of Arcadia with a lot of development projects as well as a senior living facility in the City of Arcadia. About a year ago, during the COVID pandemic, we donated masks to the Arcadia Unified School District. I don't remember the exact number, but we donated over 100,000 masks. And through that, over the course of the last few months, as well as the months prior to when I decided to run for election, I've had the opportunity to talk with students. I've had the opportunity to talk with parents, both past and present. Through those conversations, I've started to learn about the issues that the district are having and how the district could be better. And so that is why I decided to run for the Arcadia Unified School District. One issue that, trumps all other issues were mental health. And that's something that I don't believe is, specific to one school district or to a school, but an issue that we're all facing, especially after the COVID pandemic.
Ms. Chavez, same question. When did your relationship with AUSD start, and what experience specifically within AUSD makes you a valuable asset to the board?
Oh, you're sorry.
Thanks, sorry. Typical. My relationship with AUSD started when my own children started kindergarten. And much like Mr. Ang, I jumped right in. I was a classroom volunteer and a PTA president, chaired many committees, often served on PTAs at 2 schools at the same time. And as my kids went through the system, I was very involved at every level, sitting on site councils to help make decisions for campuses and getting to know administration and teachers. At the high school, I was also the Arcadia Music Club president. And so those opportunities not only let you learn about the district, but they also allow you to meet and create relationships with other families in our school system. So that's how my relationship started. The thing that I believe makes me most suited to be part of our school board is 1, that experience, and 2, the experience of being on the board. And I share that concern with mental health, and I'm really proud of all the work that we've done in the last 4 to 5 years in that area and creating supports for our students.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Zhang. Have you attended any AUSD school board meetings? Have you met with the superintendent or any PTSA presidents? And what have you learned from those meetings about AUSD?
I have attended school board meetings over YouTube Live. I have not attended any school board meetings in person. I have met with the superintendent previously, and he stated one issue that was declining students in registering for declining attendance or students in the Arcadia Unified School District.
All right, Ms. Chavez, same question. Have you attended any school board meetings? Have you met with the superintendent or any PTSA presidents? And what have you learned from those meetings?
Sure. Of course, I've been at all our school board meetings for the last, I think I've missed one meeting, maybe two in the last 5 years. And I meet regularly with our superintendent. One of the really important parts of being president of the school board is agenda creation and review alongside the superintendent. And so I meet regularly, bi-weekly at minimum, with Dr. Van Osdal. I also really enjoy meeting with PTA presidents. The most easy way to do that is to attend a council PTA meeting. And our board, in addition to serving on the board, we also liaise with parent groups. And so I have been the liaison to PTA. Currently that is board member Yee, but she and I have both attended some campus site PTSA meetings as well as council. The things that you learn from those meetings are what's happening right now on our campuses, what are our parents doing to support their schools and engage our kids, all the amazing activities that happen, everything from carnivals to lunchtime activities. And when meeting with the superintendent, we get to discuss the board agenda items. So that means everything we're creating and making decisions about. And that ranges from contracts with outside vendors, things like who will take care of our campuses as gardeners, to what kind of curriculum are we looking for in an area when our teachers are presenting us with different options. So it's quite a broad range of things, but it is those meetings have been instrumental in helping me stay up to date with what's happening with our board.
And Mr. Ang, the same question. Have you attended any AUSD school board meetings, met with superintendent, PTSA presidents?
Yes, I've attended all board meetings for the last 8 years. I may have missed 2. So we meet twice a month. And the second part of the question is really, do we meet with the superintendent? I meet with Dr. Van Osdal on a regular basis. Whether in person, we meet at least twice a month. We also have a call to each other prior to each board meeting, just to review any issues that may require questions that need to be answered, also to address current issues that we may not be aware of. And those meetings are very useful. It really gives us a sense of the pulse of what's going on, to give us better insight into what kind of decisions we need to make at the board meetings. We're updated in terms of every aspect of the school district from campus to campus, especially since all the principals essentially report to the superintendent. So we have a pretty good sense of the pulse of what's going on a regular basis because of the superintendent. Communication between the board and the superintendent is key. Additionally, we do meet with PTA presidents, all 10 campuses, on a regular basis. I'm not the liaison at the moment to all the PTAs. However, one individual from the board is usually assigned to that function. So I've been the liaison in the past, and it's important. It's important because there's a lot of communication that needs to be distributed between the district and PTA and vice versa. PTA is close to the ground. They're in the classrooms on a regular basis. They're constantly helping teachers, and they have a good sense of what's going on a day-to-day basis, and we need to know that. In terms of policies and decisions that we make, we relay that down to PTA also. PTA is constantly kept in touch in terms of issues, things that may concern us, and we may have questions for PTA in order to help us, guide us in terms of making decisions. So yes, communication is key. We take full advantage of it. Our communication channels are very clear in Arcadia. We do a really good job at it.
These next three questions are from an AUSD fifth grader. So Ms. Chavez, the first question is, how will you get everyone's opinion and make sure we all have a voice in your decisions, including students' voices?
Nicole, can you repeat that question? Because I got a lot of feedback on the beginning. Sorry.
How will you get everyone's opinion?
Make sure we all have a voice in your decisions, including students' voices.
Sure. That's a great question. Student voice is really important in Arcadia, and as well as listening to everyone's opinion. And one of the hardest parts about being a school board member is weighing lots of different opinions and then pulling that all together to make the best decisions we can for our district. There are certain things we are doing already. There's thought exchanges. Like Mr. Eng said, we regularly meet and hear from PTAs. So we also hear from individual parents all the time. We do board study sessions where we reach out and invite community every year when we're talking about things that are changing or growing in the district. And so those are opportunities. But for student voices pieces is the student representative to the school board. Ms. Ava Wu was our rep this year. And so at every single board meeting, not only do we get student reports from the high school, but we have an actual student who is part of our board and helps input into our discussion and shares that perspective. And I would just say for the younger students, every single board member goes on what we call learning walks at all our campuses. And those are great opportunities because we're in the classroom, often with student tour leaders. We sit on student panels and get to hear student opinion about a wide range of what's happening on their particular campus. How they, especially this year, we got to hear about so much student leadership in reconnecting to campus. And that was a really wonderful opportunity. But that is one of the most on the ground ways that we talk to students regularly. And I really value student voice. So one of the things that I do is volunteer with the Arcadia Sis Teens, which is a teen volunteer group full of Arcadia kids giving their time and to better our community, but also gives me a chance to hear firsthand their own experiences in school. And just hearing from our families, but we're always available.
Chavez, the second question this AUSD fifth grader is, will school lunches still be free?
That's a great question. The reason school lunches are free now is there was a change in how school lunches were funded and a mandate at the federal and state level that said during COVID, all lunches will be free. And I'm so proud of our nutrition services department because they just hit the ground running and started producing more meals so quickly for more families. I would highly doubt that once the government commits to paying for free lunches for all students, that they would pull that funding away. I will say prior to that, Arcadia did a great job coming up with student input toward meals. I know they were doing some spicy tuna rolls and some interesting things. My kids' favorites were always chicken nuggets, but the funding that we use for that, we never got reimbursed fully to pay for. And so the district loses money by feeding students, but feeding students is really important. So to get that additional funding to allow all meals to be free was a really great thing. And it has continued now 2 years in a row. And I would expect, having talked with local legislators recently, that will not change. I have not heard that will change.
The third question is, at my school, I have seen students using racist comments which are mocking people of different ethnicities. Our counselor talks to us sometimes, but I think more has to be done. Can you do something to stop this kind of behavior?
This is heartbreaking when we hear students saying that they're hearing unkind comments, racist comments. My sons heard things and came home, and it's never okay. I'm really glad that the counselors are working on that and sharing better ways for students to communicate with each other and break down barriers about what separates us from one another. I do think that that is something our teachers also participate in, and it needs to be a partnership with our families at home. But I think the Leader in Me program at the elementary, our web and link crew programs where you're really connecting student leaders with the rest of students. We are training kids on how to be good peers, good supporters for one another. And unfortunately, growing up is hard. And sometimes kids make poor choices in how they speak to one another. I think the more we can do on teaching how to not be a bystander when you see someone else experiencing bullying and unkind comments. I think a lot of times peer support is one of the most important things that can happen. And of course, our adults on campuses are always safe people to go to get additional support. But yeah, we do a lot currently, and I think there's always more that can be done. And it's a really good question.
Okay, Mr. Ang, we are going to go through the same 3 questions. So the first one was, how will you get everyone's opinion and make sure we all have a voice in our decisions, including students' voices?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Ms. Shah has answered quite a few items that would address it. However, additionally, there's other avenues for students to communicate, and we welcome it, especially at the board level, administrators too. It's very important to hear a student's voice. So there are channels for them to do so. One is obviously we now have counselors at every level, and that allows students to voice their opinions, and that would be a way to reach the district in terms of what those concerns would be. Don't forget, every school also has their own government, student government. They're there for a reason. They're there to advocate student opinions. You have officers at each and every school, including elementary. That's what they're there for. They're there for communicating so that the voice can reach adults, administrators, teachers, so that we can hear what the issues may be, things that we may or may not be aware of. So we welcome that. That's very important. It's also why PTA is there too. The PTA is not necessarily called PTA. We keep calling it PTA, but it's really PTSA, Parent Teachers Students Association. So there are student representatives on these panels also. And that's also another option for students to voice their opinion, much like we have with our student board member. So the opportunities are there. I think people should be aware of them and take advantage of it.
The next question was, will school lunches still be free?
My understanding, as Mrs. Chavez mentioned, it will be free. The government has found a way to fund it during the COVID pandemic, and it's most likely to continue. The only issue is that in the past, when you did have free lunches, they were generally given to unduplicated students that tend to be on the needy side. And that was our way of keeping track of unduplicated students. So we may have lost that ability to track the number of students that were originally needy. And that makes it difficult because that's part of the funding formula when it comes to schools.
Next question was, at my school, I have seen students using racist comments which are mocking people of different ethnicities. Our counselor talks to us sometimes, but I think more has to be done. Can you do something to stop this kind of behavior?
This issue is very dear to me. I grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I was the only Chinese boy in an all-white neighborhood. I was the first Chinese boy in my elementary school. Brother, I faced that on a daily basis. It happened then, over 45 years ago. It still happens now, which is unfortunate. However, over time, I had in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And most of it happened because we were able to understand each other. We didn't focus on our differences. We focused on what were our commonalities. And that's probably what the solution is. We need to have people understand each other so that they don't focus on our differences, that they do focus on we're all the same in many ways. And that's really what it comes down to. Communicating, gaining understanding between people, and we need to find more channels of understanding, ways to do that. And in some ways we do. We've already been implemented for years restorative practices, which is a way to communicate within a classroom. And what that does is it creates community. When you have 25 plus students sitting in a classroom discussing issues together, they have a chance, an opportunity to empathize with each other, understand what each other's problems are, and really care for each other. Once you do that, you break down those barriers. And that's something we've been working really hard at, and we're going to continue to do so.
I'm going to pause for just 1 second. I'm sorry. The TriCaster's having an issue. We're just going to restart. Just give us 1 second.
Okay. Mr. Zhang, we're going to start over on that question. So, how will you get everyone's opinion and make sure we all have a voice in your decisions, including students' voices?
Like I said previously, over the past few months, I've been talking with both current and past students. But I think what's also important is to be in the classroom, talking with students, being at club meetings, talking to them about what the trends are, what the changes are, even what the latest TikTok dances are. Having that face-to-face contact with students is very important to understand what they need. At the end of the day, if I'm elected, my goal is to safeguard the student success. So I think that's what's important.
Will school lunches still be free?
Unfortunately, I don't have that answer. I would have to speak with state legislators to figure out if that's true. From Ms. Chavez and Mr. Ng's question, Mr. Ng's answer, I'd hope that it stays free.
At my school, I have seen students using racist comments which are mocking people. Our counselor talks to us sometimes, but I think more has to be done. Can you do something to stop this kind of behavior?
Racist comments are never okay. Bullying is never okay. But what's important is that we provide the support and we open that dialogue between the students to understand that, at the end of the day, we're all the same people. We're all going through the same struggles. We're all doing the same thing every day. And I think that is what needs to happen.
Okay, next question, Mr. Ng. What is your plan to promote the mental health of each student within AUSD?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the key things is that we've been addressing this well before the pandemic. Restorative practices is something that we've been working on for quite a while. We've trained our teachers to implement it. Our students understand the programs and they're involved. The key, as I mentioned earlier, is that it builds community. Once you build community, you have socializing amongst these people that spend the majority of their day together. Teachers and students, sometimes more time with each other than they spend with their families. So it's important to understand each other's needs, not just your academic needs, but personal needs. I think once that's shared, it creates a sense of understanding of where the other person is coming from. And that in itself is huge. I've been in community circles where information is shared, where the teacher would ask a question that allows the students to answer, so the teacher can gauge the temperature of the room. I've been in a middle school classroom where the question was, what's the best thing that's happened to you today, recently? And that teases out a lot of things. You know, typically in Arcadia, they may say, oh, I got an A in math. The teacher may also ask, what's the worst thing going on in your life? And I was there in a middle school classroom when one student boldly said, the worst thing in my life right now is my parents announced that they were getting a divorce. Think about the courage that student had to share that with her classmates. Think about the empathy in that room being shared, how everyone now is concerned about this individual. Now the teacher also has an understanding of why this person's attitude may be the way it is. That addresses social behavior issues. Once you build community, and that's an example, that's just one example that I witnessed firsthand that we're doing on a regular basis at all levels, TK through 12. And that's just one technique that we're using. And we've been addressing this, we're going to continue to address it, we know it's an issue. It shouldn't just be a hot button because now it's a big thing under the headlines right now. We recognized this a long time ago. We're in front of these students on a regular basis, every day, for hours. And we're going to do something about it.
Mr. Zhang, what is your plan to promote the mental health of each student within AUSD?
Like I said previously, mental health is very important. It's important to ensuring a student's success. Throughout my campaign, I've had the opportunity to talk to students, and they all had the same experience I had when I was in high school. And that experience was not being able to communicate with parents because of a cultural disconnect or a cultural difference. And because of this, I'd like to help implement assemblies held at the beginning of the school year where students, parents, and professionals are brought in to talk about what a student goes through, the struggles that they go through during school. Another thing that I'd like to implement or help implement is announcing the support that the district has for the students. It's important that the students know that they can reach out to teachers, to district staff, to talk about struggles that they're going through. While I was growing up, during my high school years, I was a sophomore. I had a classmate who decided that laying himself on the tracks was the only solution. Now, I hope that no other student needs to feel this way because there is support out there.
Ms. Chavez, what is your plan to promote the mental health of each student within AUSD?
Thanks, Nicole. First, let me just offer my condolences to Mr. Zhang, who knew someone who felt they had no other option. And that's a tragic loss and something we would never, ever want to see a student feeling like they were in that space. And like Mr. Eng mentioned, we've been working in AUSD in this area for many, many years, way before the pandemic hit. And it's interesting to hear Mr. Zhang say things like, I would make sure that parents knew about the supports we had. I would make sure that students knew what we could do. And I'd love to say have this education. I know, like at the elementary level, even during the pandemic, our team of counselors had sessions on everything from how to deal with anxiety and your child to how to deal with online bullying and things like that. And so we really are trying to give parents access to good information. And then there's the bigger piece. Do students know what the supports are? We are very fortunate that Arcadia has been, over the last few years, not just boosting programming in that area, but creating spaces on every campus for wellness. I know the high school's new wellness center, and I see like Instagram all the time, Wellness Wednesday, and there are little tiny things that constantly support wellness, yoga activities, lunchtime things at middle and elementary. It's part of every day. It's not just something we announce at the beginning of the year. It's not something we react to as if it's a crisis. We talk to kids all the time and to each other about how important that is. And I really appreciated that Mr. Eng shared about the community circles. Not only is our entire staff trained in the restorative practices and building community, our board members have gone through that training too. This is truly a district-wide focus and has been for a long time.
Mr. Zhang, what is your assessment of the current board's management of AUSD? What specifically do you disagree with, if anything, and how would you have done it differently?
I think that one of the biggest issues is the disconnect between a lot of the parents and the board. A lot of parents that I've spoke to within the last few months have expressed that they have brought concerns and issues to the board and they weren't resolved. I think what could have been done differently was to address a lot of the concerns that the parents had, to have conversations with parents and to communicate with them in a way that parents were able to feel listened to.
Ms. Chavez, what is your assessment of the current board's management of AUSD? What specifically do you disagree with, if anything, and how would you have done it differently?
That is such a big question. I'll tell you, the last few years being on school board has been an adventure. It's been a roller coaster. No one has a playbook for a pandemic. In the ordinary course, school board does a really good and thorough job. I don't think people always know how much homework goes into decision making, how many hours of reading we do every week prior to going to board meetings and making decisions. I would love to see enhanced parent communication. It makes me sad and uncomfortable to hear that parents don't feel listened to, because I know I've spent a lot of time, as well as our other board members, listening to, meeting with, talking to parents about their concerns. And I think this goes back to, we hear from parents on every end of the spectrum about what they're concerned about, what their issues are. And you are guiding a school district of almost 10,000 students. Those families don't all believe the same things are important. They don't all believe the same things are right for their children. And it is the school board's job to listen, to acknowledge, and to pay attention to all the input we get. But it often conflicts. And so what you have to do as a board member is serve the most students the best way you possibly can, while balancing all those interests, staying true to AUSD's priorities, which are always student safety, student health, and then going into students being able to make a profound impact on their world and staying true to the values of AUSD. And so when you take all that together, that's really the role of the board. I think one of the things I'd like to see enhanced is working a little with the community and getting their feedback on what they think would be better. Communicating. We've been meeting and talking to parents all the time throughout the last few years and regularly, but not all parents want the same result. And sometimes people feel unheard when they don't see the result that they want. But please know that we always are focused on students first and what's best for students as a whole.
Mr. Eng, what is your assessment of the current board's management, and what specifically do you disagree with, if anything?
I think your question is specific to during the pandemic period. I think in general the school district has performed really well. We need to step back and also remember to acknowledge and recognize the effort that's been made by staff during this difficult time, 2 years. And I've mentioned it before. We had people pivot and do things that are outside of their job descriptions. Teachers had to make their living rooms into classrooms. We had custodial work, facilities people are retrofitting our facilities so that we can be COVID safe, as safe as possible. And on and on. The list is long. We've done a lot. All while maintaining our focus, and that is to keeping our students safe and healthy, and also giving them the best education possible to each and every one of them. There may have been some shortfalls, maybe there was some communication issues, but my understanding is that we communicated as often as possible. We've already put out coronavirus communication number 77 over the last 2 years. We did everything we can to get information out to our community and the parents. And of course, we always welcome communication. The boards are open forums for parents to come. They can voice their opinion. There is an open forum section during our meetings. Board members and administrators' emails are all accessible, public information. We're reached all the time by many people. We have other avenues of communication, such as PTA, of course. It's not just a place where you pay your annual dues and attend the meeting. Attend the meeting means gaining information. You're going to hear firsthand from people that are in the trenches, in the classrooms. You're also going to understand what the needs are. And it's also an opportunity to express your needs. It's not as if you will not be heard. You will be heard. We will always listen. I think that's really important. We will never stop listening. Listening is the key to our position. As board members, we represent the community. We represent the parents. So we need to hear what the community and the parents have to say, because our decisions are made based on those opinions.
Ms. Chavez, back to you. If you are elected as a board member this year, how will you balance the different interests of AUSD teachers, staff, parents, and students?
I've been doing it for 5 years. I think it goes back to all of those people may have different wants, but we share the same goal. We want a rigorous and challenging academic experience for our students, and our teachers are and have been, as Mr. Eng said, heroic throughout the pandemic. I don't think there's another profession that had to completely change it around so many times and with so little warning, and they just kept pushing through. So we share that same goal. We share the goal of having safe environment for our kids. We share the goals of wanting students to feel connected, valued, and given the tools that they need to succeed in life, right? Our goal in education is to be a place of opportunity. Public education especially means we are serving a wide spectrum of students. Everyone is welcome on a public campus, and they have a wide spectrum of needs. And so balancing all of that is making sure, one of our board goals has been to have a really high level staff that is well compensated. And we do, because we think people are important. They're the ones delivering our education and services. So there are teacher interests, but we are very fortunate to have very strong relationships with all of our unions, and everyone comes to the table looking to solve issues, not to create extra ones. And that's a really important dynamic, and it's something highly unique to Arcadia. There are often very dysfunctional boards, dysfunctional relationships, and we work really hard so that we don't have those extraneous things, but we can really focus on teaching and learning and making sure we're on the cutting edge of innovative technologies and procedures so that we're giving our students the best that we can. And it's moving pieces, it's putting a puzzle together. And that is why having long-term perspective about how our school district functions at every level and across campuses, it really helps you to balance those competing interests and do what's right for students in the end. It always comes back for, is this good for kids?
Mr. Ang, how will you balance the different interests of AUSD teachers, staff, parents, and students?
I think Mrs. Chavez hit on a lot of those points. I think one of the keys is what we practice in terms of how the district manages its relationship with the teachers. You know, when we annually go to the table in terms of bargaining, we practice what's called interest-based bargaining. Interest-based bargaining is an opportunity to really look at our common interests. What are we trying to achieve together? As opposed to showing up at the bargaining table with an attorney armed with a list of demands. And I think the same applies when it comes to all the other parties in terms of stakeholders and community partners, including parents, including students, and of course teachers, administrators, and the board itself. You know, we need to stay focused on what our goal is, what our objective is. And that is to provide a high quality education for each and every student. That's where it starts. And that's kind of in many ways where it ends. When we make decisions, when we do things together, it should be based on trying to meet that particular objective. Whether it's a budgetary issue, whether it's a curriculum issue, whether it's a personnel issue. It starts and ends with the welfare of our students. And once we are clear with that, we're clear with that common objective, a lot gets done. And we've been succeeding in many ways with that particular mindset. And we hope to continue that and build that and make it stronger. I don't have too much more to add to that.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. Zhang, how will you balance the different interests of AUSD teachers, staff, parents, and students?
I think Ms. Chavez and Mr. Ng, they both talked about a goal. I think the goal for our school district is to ensure the success of our students and to keep our students safe. Throughout my campaign, we talked about the power of 1 is 0. And what this means is not one single person has the power to change things on the board, but it is through collective voices that bring in different opinions and different perspectives to create change for the students in a positive way.
Speaking of campaigns, Mr. Ang, how much has your campaign raised to date? And roughly what percentage of those campaign funds have come from people who reside outside of Arcadia?
The campaign, actual numbers, huh? To date, I've raised approximately $3,000. And practically, I would believe 95 to 99% of those came from Arcadia residents. And that covers less than half of my costs of the entire campaign.
Mr. Zhang, what about you? How much has your campaign raised to date?
I would have to get back to you on that for how much we've raised, but that information is all public. As for the percentage of Arcadia residents that have donated, we've had a lot of Arcadia residents donate to my campaign, as well as support from the San Gabriel Valley.
Ms. Chavez, how much has your campaign raised to date? And roughly what percentage of those campaign funds have come from people who reside outside of Arcadia?
Sure. All of my donations except one come from inside Arcadia, and that one outside donation is from my parents who, God love them, they always support what I do, and so it was very kind of them. I've raised probably just about the same amount as Mr. Ang, right around the $3,000 mark. And I think that's pretty standard for Arcadia school board campaigns. In our district, usually the candidates are well known in town, and there isn't a need to spend in the tens of thousands of dollars to get to know the community, because we do have long established relationships.
Thank you. And back to Mr. Zhang, can you speak any languages other than English? If not, will this hinder your work as a board member?
I can speak English. English is my first language, but I can also speak Mandarin. That's my second language, and throughout the past few months, I've heard from parents and community that my Chinese has improved.
Ms. Chavez, can you speak any languages other than English?
I speak very elementary Spanish because I took 4 years of French in school. So sadly, there isn't a whole lot of opportunity to use French in California. So I probably, in retrospective, should have taken Spanish. But English is my first language. But one of the things that I really appreciated about Arcadia is that all of the communications that we put out, if they are important for parents to know, which they go out in Spanish and Chinese and English. And so there are great efforts made to translate. And I've seen live translation done in a lot of parent education as well.
Mr. Ng, what about you? Can you speak any languages other than English?
I can't claim to be very proficient in a second language. However, I do speak elementary Cantonese. I grew up actually in a Toisan dialect household. And I do have a elementary understanding of Spanish. I took 4 years of Spanish in high school and make an annual trip to Mexico for my church mission trip.
Ms. Chavez, what are your plans to address the concerns of declining enrollment?
That's a really good question, and one that we are addressing already. We're doing a deep dive as a district, looking at several factors of what's contributing to that. We always watch statistics on things like birth rates, how many people are moving to Arcadia. We're in constant communication with the city about housing developments. What do we hope to expect on people moving to town? So we're really looking at the numbers, and I think one of the things that we can do is make sure that we're capturing students in our district. Families have a lot of choices when it comes to schools, and so we want them to know that our public district provides amazing educational opportunities as well as services, and we hope to bring them into our district. We also are working to make sure that the folks that work in Arcadia know that we want their children in our schools as well. So it's two-pronged. And then I will say the piece that, we can work on that. We bring it. It definitely impacts our budget, but we can also make sure that we are running as an efficient as possible organization. Arcadia has been very good at that for very many years, making sure that we're living within our means and our budgets while still giving our students all that we can.
Mr. Ng, this is the last question, by the way. What are your plans to address the concerns of declining enrollment?
Well, obviously, declining enrollment is a big issue. It's been something that's been kind of occurring for the past few years. We've been averaging as a district somewhere between 1% and 2% annually, which is actually very low compared to other districts. However, it does impact our budget because with declining enrollment, it means declining funds from the state, which means you need to take a look at perhaps reduction of staff, which is a big concern. We've addressed it in the meantime. However, a loss in enrollment is mostly due to a number of factors. One is lower birth rates in California. People are leaving California, and we're a destination for a lot of international students. And because of COVID, we've had a reduction in terms of enrollment there. The solution is to really continue to do what we're really doing, which is Arcadia has been and always will be a destination school district. People want to go to school here. If we can maintain that particular aspect of what we are and what we represent, the hope is that students will return. Once COVID subsides a bit, once people feel more comfortable about coming back to school, we're excited that come August we're going to perhaps do our best to reverse the trend.
Mr. Zhang, what are your plans to address declining enrollment?
My plans to address declining enrollment is that we should be speaking with the city, speaking with development services, seeing what new developments are coming to the city of Arcadia. The city is really expensive to live in, and with new developments, there will be housing that is more affordable. So I think that's the first step.
And that is all the questions that we have. Thank you, candidates, for joining us, and thank you to everyone watching this live. If your questions did not get answered tonight, feel free to reach out to the candidates directly. The recording of this will be available on the Apache News YouTube channel after. Thank you.